Welcome to Accessing Life, a podcast focused on empowering people with developmental disabilities to live their best life. In this episode, Chester and BJ discover how a process called supported decision-making is helping people legally get more independence in their lives. We'll hear from someone who has benefited from supported decision-making, as well as a legal expert with OPWDD, so you can see if supported decision-making is something that could help you or someone you know.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the show.
And we have our guest here to talk about supported decision-making, and we'll let them introduce themselves, and I think we'll start with Bobby.
Hi, my name is Bobby. I live in Rochester, New York, and I've had my supported decision-making plan for a few years now. It's worked out great for me.
Thank you, Chester. Thank you, BJ. Nice to meet you, Bobby. I'm Haldan Blecher. I'm an attorney at OPWDD, a deputy counsel for Medicaid contracts, real estate, and trusts and estates, which kind of includes guardianship too. And I was involved in writing the supported decision-making law in New York.
How did you get involved hearing about supportive decision-making or learn from someone else?
Bobby, you want to go first?
Sure, I was going to ask you the same question. Well, I found out through, because at the time, before I lived where I'm living now, I found out through Heritage Christian Services and some of the people that were supporting me through that agency, and I found out because it was new. It was a new trial thing or pilot, whatever you want to call it. So I was the first one to actually go through it. So as I was going through it, I was being asked questions about what I think, how it needs to be set up. And as I was starting my own situation up, it was being put together that way by my team supporting me at the time and helping me go through it, and us coming up with suggestions for the pilot program.
I learned about supported decision-making when I was in law school. I was doing research about disability rights law, and one of the professors at my law school used to be a judge, Judge Kristen Booth Glenn, and she had written some decisions when she was a judge about supported decision-making and was doing research about it. And she wanted a research assistant. And so I signed up to be her research assistant, and it became a big focus of my path to becoming a lawyer. And so when I finished law school and I got a job at OPWDD, I kept working on supported decision-making for OPWDD because the agency was really interested in trying to make supported decision-making law in New York and saw that I had experience with it. So that was a big reason why I got the job that I got.
I have a question for you, Bobby. Since you have worked on your supportive decision-making, and you've been successful with it, do you think that it's worth it for other people to hear about it and take advantage of it?
Yes, it is. What I tell people though is it's got to be a decision that's not only for the individual to make. It's got to be a decision that everybody that's on their support team or that's supporting them at the time, guardians and whoever, they have to agree to it. That's actually the first thing I had to do, was, and what I mean by agree to it was get everybody that, because before I did this supported decision making, I had my own guardians, and I had to get them to agree to actually let me do this.
Mm.
So, and help them understand what it is, and um, help them learn what it is, and um, how it was going to work. Because I had some guardians, some people that were my guardians at the time, that weren't really sure what it was about, and they were thinking one thing, and I was thinking another thing. So, so it was getting them on board to agree to let me do this was the first one of the first things I had to do.
Right. We wrote the law in a way that basically we wanted to make sure that people could basically choose whoever they wanted as their supporters. But like Bobby says, they have to agree to do it, right? You actually have to get people on board. So if I wanted my sister to be my supporter and she didn't want to, then I'd be out of luck. She doesn't have to do it. There are also some other slight limits. So for instance, if somebody had been accused of abusing me or neglecting me, then if that accusation had been investigated and they found that yes, that person had abused or neglected me, then I wouldn't be able to choose them as a supporter. But that's pretty much the only limitation. The only other one is, and I know this comes up, is staff. Whether or not, if let's say I had a ComHab worker or some other kind of personal aide or some other staff member that I wanted to be my supporter, they could do that, but their job, their employer might have something to say about it, right? There are labor laws and other things that might potentially get in the way. And we don't say as OPWDD, and the law doesn't say that they can't do it, but an employer could, in theory, say, we don't think this is appropriate because maybe we think there's a conflict of interest or some other conflict. And the employer could say, we can't let you do this given your current job. So I think, the law is still pretty new and this is still, playing out, and we'll see how this works out. And certainly, some employers are allowing this to happen, and I think some will probably prohibit it. And so that's going to differ case by case.
Yes, I was wondering if Haldan could give our audience a little background, because I'm sure this supported decision making being a law is new to everybody. So could you give a little background on,
Sure.
did you help write the law and get it into where it is now?
The real roots of supported decision making, especially the laws around supported decision making, start really mostly in around 2006. And in 2006, the United Nations basically issued a convention. So like a proclamation, the equivalent of a law. It's the UN, it's not really a law, but it's like the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, also known as Article 12 of the United Nation Convention. And it basically said that people have a right to legal capacity, right? And that's a kind of term that gets thrown around a lot, legal capacity. But what it really means at its core is that people have the right to make decisions for themselves. And when the United Nations did that, a bunch of countries, including the United States, started thinking about how they could um, pass laws or change their laws to make sure that people had more of that right, were able to exercise more of that right for themselves. And so in some other countries like Canada and Israel and Bulgaria and a lot of other countries, but those were some of the first ones, they started looking at this supported decision-making idea. And the idea really was, how do we have something instead of guardianship for people who don't need guardianships, but who still want some support from the people around them in helping them make their own decisions instead of having people make decisions for them. And it looks a little different. It's, in every country, but, a sort of a model started developing around the world. And over time, that came to the United States. And you started seeing some states that were passing laws here about supported decision making and supported decision making agreements, or what Bobby called his supported decision making plan. So that's like the contract or the document that somebody puts together to help them decide who they want support from and what kind of support they want. And that's what makes it sort of like a legal device or a legal document that can be followed and that other people can read and understand what somebody wants. So those other states started doing that. And I think the first states that did it were Texas and Delaware. And lots of other states got interested in it. And in New York, what happened was that we decided collectively that we should run a pilot program. And the Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, DDPC, decided to put up a couple of $1 million to fund this pilot program to basically figure out how should we do this. If we want to do supported decision making in New York, what should that look like? How does it work best? What are other countries doing? What are other states doing? What's the best way to do this? What would a law look like, et cetera? And that pilot ran for about 5 years and then kind of an extra year because of COVID. And they came up with a bunch of recommendations for what the law in New York should look like. And the big difference in New York that other states and other countries hadn't really done is that they involve someone called a facilitator, basically someone who can help the person who wants decision-making support and their supporters, the people they choose to get help from, can help guide them through the process, help them make the plan, the agreement, and help basically educates everyone during the process. And other states don't have that. They sort of leave it to people to figure it out for themselves. But in New York, this pilot program basically figured out it would be really helpful to have somebody help guide this process. And once they do that, then they sign off and they're not really involved afterwards. Then it's just the person and their supporters. So that's sort of the background. And then basically they did that. And then OPWDD said, we really want this to become a law. And we took those recommendations that the pilot program had put together and we wrote a law or proposal for a law, a bill. And we found sponsors in the state legislature to put it forward to become law. And we were unsuccessful the first year. This was in 2021. And then the second year, we did it again in 2022. And that year it passed. And the governor signed the bill and made it law in July of 2022. In almost all cases, to get supported decision-making facilitation services, you would need to be eligible for OPWDD services, because for OPWDD to pay for a service, you have to be eligible. But the law is written in a way that still allows people to have supported decision-making even without OPWDD eligibility. It just looks a little bit different if you don't. So for one thing, you wouldn't be guaranteed to be able to get that facilitation services. There may be facilitators that would do it on a volunteer basis, or even some that might charge money for it, if you didn't have OPWDD services. So it's not impossible. But if you can't get facilitation, you can still get a supported decision-making agreement. It's just that you don't have all of the benefits of the law if you don't use facilitation first. It's most useful for people with OPWDD services, but even if you don't have OPWDD services, you can still get a lot of benefits from it.
Thank you, Haldan. Bobby,
Yes.
when you originally wanted to do this, were people discouraging you, and what made you want to keep going? Because I'm sure you were discouraged.
What made me want to keep going was the fact that I I knew myself, and a lot of people knew that I could do this, and long story short, I basically knew I wanted to be not only out on my own, but knew figured out fi- figured out going through some things that it would be better for me to be my own guardian in this case, because um, in order to do a lot of things that I wanted to do, I would need my guardians, whoever it was, to sign off. Like I could say yes, I wanted to do this, but they had the last say on whether or not I could do it. What finally gave me the push was at the time I was looking for a job, um, and the people that I was going through at the time to help me find a job was like, okay, you could do it, but we need your mom to sign off on this or whoever to sign off on that. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I could sign my own stuff, you know, sign my own name. They don't need to sign for everything.
Yeah.
So that's what finally gave me the push was just that. And the hardest part for me was because getting my guardian to understand, you know, that I wanted to do this because of this and that. And they at the time were thinking I was having people influence me, telling me stuff, and it took other people helping me get them to understand, like, no, he can do this, or you know, kind of get them to see a different picture in a different, you know, in a different way.
Right.
Wow.
Once they once they were on board, they were obviously willing to help me get get the other people I needed to get on board to do this once they understood what the process was.
You both brought up some interesting questions about, supportive decision making worldwide as well as, you know, what's happening in states. As you said, Holden, and Brown, you started working on the legislation around 2021. At that time in the summer, I went to Massachusetts and did a fellowship with the Samuel Center for Social Connectionness. I was one of the first persons with intellectual disabilities to be a fellow. And part of my fellowship was working with Massachusetts on self advocates, mass advocates standing strong on supportive decision making, and their legislators gave them the ability to come up with something what would work. But one of the problems that they found was that people were intimidated by, doing supportive decision making, and they didn't want families or providers, you know, not respecting what they wanted. So what I want to know from you guys is, how do you get people to understand that this is something that will work for you and this is something that could change your life, as you were talking about, Bobby?
It's kind of what I just said in my first answer. It was um getting she doesn't mind, so I'll say this. It was getting my mom to, because she was the way my guardianship was set up was it was my mom first, and then if something happened to my mom, it was my aunt Kathy, and then if it was something happened to her, then it was my sister, and then my brother. So it was getting all of them to understand, getting my mom first to understand what it is, and because she was thinking, because she was in her mindset, she was thinking, you know, I was getting people that were supporting me that was in the agency I was in, which was Heritage Christian Services, to they were filling up my mind with, you know, all this nonsense, you know, because her mindset was thinking, well, what if he does move out on his own, or if he does do this, what's going to happen to all his supports?
Mm.
You know, what's going to happen to the money? What's going to
Yeah.
happen to, you know, this and that? Because she was thinking the mindset of, is he going to lose all his funding, or, you know, how is he going to get to work? How is he going to go shopping and all this other stuff? So, you know,
Right.
that was her mindset. So it was getting her on board first, and getting her to understand with the help of other people, not just me talking to her, because at the time, it's much better now, but at the time, every time I would bring this up, or we would um we would try to talk about it one on one, it would end up in an argument, and we never saw eye to eye, because she was thinking one way and I was thinking my way, you know. So
Yeah.
it was getting other people to help me explain to her, you know, what the process was, and what, what getting me people to see, getting her to see my point of view. And once she saw my point of view through my eyes, it was, I couldn't, sometimes I would have to slow her down and be like, you know, because she couldn't wait to tell everybody, you know, about
Yeah.
it, and
Right.
Wow.
get everybody on board and help them understand what the process was.
I
So
think
you
there are a
won
lot of,
everybody over.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. But I had to have my other sports help me explain to her what it was, and I don't remember the exact conversation, was somebody that she was working with at the time was told her something like, well, are you letting your worries, you know, basically cloud your judgment, or are you just, you know, seeing it from, are you seeing it from his point of view, or are you letting your worries? And basically, what it was she was letting her worries cloud her thinking, and until somebody told her something, the light bulb didn't go off. She didn't even call me. She came right over to the place I was living at the time, and apologized to me. In fact, I had to tell her stop saying sorry. You know,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people that have probably a similar experience to you, Bobby, that,
yeah,
you know, especially people like you who had guardians, you know, there's this process of getting the guardians on board. But I think also even people who don't have guardians, right, they still have family
yeah,
who, like, you know, who are worried about them and want to make sure that, you know, like you were saying, that all their benefits are in place, and whatever financial benefits, and making sure that they, you know, are safe and taken care of, like any parent or loved one feels about their loved ones.
yeah,
I think, you know, to your question, Chester, I certainly see that for some people, the challenges of sort of getting people interested in this is just as much about getting the person themselves about interested in supported decision making as it is in convincing their family or their potential supporters that this is an arrangement that not only is going to keep them safe, but actually is going to help them grow as a person and help them, you know, be happier and, you know, teach them life skills and do all the things we all want in our life, right? That's,
Yes.
you know, that can be a hard thing to do. I mean, so I think that some of the challenge is helping families understand that um, that supported decision making is a good option for a lot of people, and that it actually has a lot of benefits over guardianship. It's better in a lot of ways than guardianship. Uh, you know, even in terms of keeping people safe, which is what you hear a lot of families talking about, saying, "Oh, we need guardianship because we want to make sure that you know, that this person is safe." Supported decision making can do that for most people, for a lot of people, and convincing the families can be hard. But I think the other thing that I would want to bring up is that it can also be hard to you mentioned people being intimidated by the idea of supported decision making, and I think that also goes for a lot of people, who would be the ones who need support, right? The people that we call
Yeah.
decision makers, the people themselves, the people with disabilities themselves, because it's it can look intimidating. You have to go through this process, you have to sign and develop this plan, this legal document. You have to go through the process that Bobby's describing, like convincing your family to be involved. And, it can be a lot of work. And I think that can be intimidating for some folks, especially, because some folks haven't been given the chance maybe to make a lot of their decisions themselves, while they were kids or, even in their adulthood. And so the idea of now getting to make all those choices can be scary for some people. So I think, I don't have the answers, but I know that self-advocates can certainly do a lot to help their peers understand what supported decision making is about. And I know that OPWDD as an agency, we can certainly try to share information about it to help people understand that even though this may be, not a simple or really short process, it's a process that, that people should look into.
And one of the things I just thought of was like, because they can be confused about like they're so also used to having a lot of supports. Because I know a couple people, and actually I know someone I know someone else who she's like she was so used to having people make those decisions, make certain decisions for her, that she would sometimes talk to me, and I'd have to be like, No, because you are where you are now, it's up to you. You don't have to worry about what other people are gonna say.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they're going to they're going to still support you, just support you in a different way. In my case, one of those, except for one of those people, because that were on my support team before this, when my guardianship was in place, they're still supporting me. They're just supporting me the way I want them to support me, and that's what they had to get used to. in
Yeah.
fact, in fact, I can tell you right now, um, you know, I don't tell her this, but because I know she means well, and I don't take offense to it because I know she means well. But my mom still still goes in the mode of sometimes, you know, you know, ta feeling like she's taking over, and I just, and and I just have to tell people sometimes, you're you're doing fine, you know. Um, it's it's just how my mom is. She's she's in that mode right now, so sometimes I just have to let her, you know, go through the motions, and I'd be like, but I know she means well, so I don't take offense to it. But that's how it is sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my mom is still mom mode, but I still, you know, I'm still in control. In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll give you one example. When I first moved out here, where I'm living now, into my apartment, which was 6 years ago now, when I first moved out here, the first day, because we were all moving in, and I was having my mom and all these people help me move in. Um, um, my staff at my first day, my staff was like, "Am I, am I doing something wrong?" Because my mom was just going, you know, in mom mode or her mode of just over saturating things or over worrying about things. She's just like, my staff whispered to me, "Am I doing something wrong?" Because she was like, "I'm not," because she was willing to help, but she didn't feel like she was doing a lot. And I'm like, no, you're fine. That's just how my mom is, you know.
Well,
So
it's hard to turn off being a parent, right? Like,
yeah. So so
you're still someone's parent.
yeah. So but now as far as our relationship, it's a whole lot better. She doesn't do anything without without talking to me first, or she if somebody calls her and asks her something, or she's like, did you talk to my son? What does he think? You know,
That's
or
great.
or if
Yeah.
something is brought up, she's actually had to call me and ask me about stuff because she didn't know about it. And that way our relationship is a whole lot better, and we don't fight at all. Because now her mindset is like he's an adult, he can make his own decisions. Before her mindset was, you know, her son, he can't do he can't make these decisions. And now she's like, she doesn't talk to me or make a decision without talking to me when it involves me. So
Sure.
that's how our relationship has gotten, and that's with my whole family. In fact, in fact, unless I tell my brother and sister about something, or unless they hear it through my mom, they don't, they don't know about it.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
And the way we end the show now, guys, we would like each of you to give our audience action steps of what to do next if they want to take this step. So I will let Bobby go first. What action step would you like the advocates to take who just heard you tell your story?
I would say go for it. If it's something like that they want to do, I would say go for it. It's gonna be a lot of work. Yes, it can be stressful, but if it's something they will really want to do, I would encourage them to do it. It's gonna be a lot of work, especially like I just said, getting everybody on board that supports them, and the steps can be, you know, can be difficult, can be long, um, depending on everybody's situation. But it's well worth it in the end, especially if they want to do it.
How about you, Holden?
To echo what Bobby says here, I mean, I guess I would say that even if you don't know that this is something that you definitely want to do, there's no harm in learning more about it. So the first thing I would probably suggest people do is to ask either, other self-advocates or their peers, or ask really their care manager to learn more about supported decision making, right? Like that's the first thing I would suggest, because you can go, you can get, information about it, you can get people to talk to you about it before deciding, learning about whether this is right for you, is just the first step in the process. And if you decide it's not, then you don't have to do it. You don't have to go through the potentially hard process. And like Bobby also says, it's not going to necessarily be hard for everybody. It's different. The process looks different for everybody,
Yep.
because supported decision making is flexible, and
Yep.
it's about what you want to do and what decisions you want to make. So, you could say, I just want to make decisions about this and not that. You have a lot of options. So I would encourage people to learn about it.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to do that is to ask your care manager. Another way is you can go straight to the Supported Decision Making New York website and read about it, if that's something, if that's easier, which is sdmny.org, sdmny.org. And but the care managers should be able to refer you to SDMNY or to OPWDD and provide you some resources and information about it. And you could even say, okay, this sounds pretty good. I want to start the process of doing what's called facilitation. And you can just sort of start the process. And again, you can always say, no, actually, I don't want to do this, and change your mind. Nothing's stopping you. So I just encourage people to learn more about it and start the process if it seems interesting to them, and see what happens. Um, if it doesn't work out or it doesn't seem like something you want to do, you can always change your mind. So that's what I would encourage people to do.
Thank you both. This was awesome. Anything from you, Chester, before we conclude?
Just thank you guys for coming on and giving our audience some great information, and hopefully they take advantage of it. And hopefully sometime we can have you guys back on, some more progress on supportive decision making. And I thank everybody for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Accessing Life is a podcast produced by the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, known as OPWDD. The producer is Michael Orzel, hosts Chester Finn and BJ Stasio. To learn more about the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, supports and services, go to opwdd.ny.gov.